Now, I know this is going to be a surprise to all of you, but I have never been considered to be a cool guy. So when I arrive at a place and there happens to be someone that greets me at the door and he happens to be a cool black dude, it's always really kind of a heartwarming thing when they refer to me as either big dog or brother. I know that's a silly thing, but I tell you, if there was one group of people on the face of the planet you could refer to as cool, is black people. And having cool black people refer to me as brother or big dog is actually kind of exciting to me. And I don't think anybody would consider that to be a racist statement to say that black people are the coolest people on the planet. It's just plain truth. The fact of the matter is, it's nothing racist about it. It's just they are the coolest. And this is someone that went to predominantly black schools and stuff like that. I can tell you straight up, coolest people on the planet. And it's really cool to actually be referred to as big dog and brother by them. It's awesome. Anyway, okay, so let's actually, before it starts to sound like I'm saying something wrong here, which I'm definitely not, very complimentary, as a matter of fact. Let me tell you about this week. Starting with my Monday, I was assigned Commerce and Cornelia, then Commerce and Hartwell, the same Commerce twice. I had never been to Commerce or Hartwell before. Went to Commerce, and this was a frozen dairy. So I was going to be going there for the frozen dairy, dropping off in Commerce, and then going to Hartwell, going back and picking up the meat and produce and going back to Commerce. Well, that ended up, there were some weird things that happened there. When I got to the Commerce, they had 14 pallets and 13 positions, which means 13 stacked pallets. And one of those pallets might have technically 2 pallets on there, 2 stickers. So might be a pallet on the bottom, but another one on top. Sometimes there's 3 stacks. Interesting thing, though, is that we could only find 13 total. So normally you would see a pallet come up with product, then a second pallet with more product on top, and they would be stretch wrapped all the way across. But there was no separation. It was all 13 stacks. It was just 13 stacks, no separate pallets. So that was interesting. I'm always paranoid about making sure that they get all their pallets, and so that way I don't have to come back. Even though I hear stories of like the very first stop that people will stop at, their pallets, they're missing one, and it's only when they completely unload the rest of the truck they find that the very last pallet at the very back happened to be one that was going to the first stop, and so they have to go and run that back. Which I hear about these stories. I wonder. I know accidents happen, so I'm sure it's possible that a DC loaded something weird, but it just makes me wonder if sometimes people just are not very engaged, because I keep hearing stories about drivers that are just pull up there and let the stores do their thing and pull their pallets off, and then they leave and go to the next one. They're not involved in the loading or unloading process. It's weird to me. Anyway, so finished Commerce, went to Cornelia. That was fine. Rest was there, so it was just, pulling things off. It was very uneventful. On my way back to the DC, though, I had an experience with a kamikaze deer. You may say, what do you mean by a kamikaze deer? Well, it's one that you would swear was trying to get hit. He was, a lot of the times I'll run into deer on the side of the road and they'll just be looking at me. This one it wasn't looking at me. He was standing on the side of the road and just casually walking straight onto the interstate. Actually, wait a minute. Was that the interstate, or was that one of the back U.S. roads? I can't remember. Not like it really matters or anything. I was going speed limit 65. Maybe it was 55. Maybe it was on the road. It was the road going back to the DC. So it was US 78. That's what it was. So it was speed limit 55. And it was going from the middle, like it's a divided. So it's divided by a big patch of grass. And so a deer he started walking out there. Well, I put on the brakes really heavily, really, really fast. And he didn't notice me at first. I kind of braced myself expecting to hit him. But he ended up spotting me and turning and running the opposite direction and ran right over just to the left of the inside lane. And by then I had slowed down and moved myself, because you want to jerk the wheel, but that's not the right thing to do. So as soon as I saw this, I kind of braced and went over, knowing that he was on the right-hand side of my lane. I went over to the left-hand side, thinking that if he just clears a little bit more before I'm stopped all the way there, then maybe I'll just bump the rear end of him or something like that and spin him around or something. But he ended up he spotted me at the very last split second and turned and ran in the direction of the truck. And by doing that, even though he was running in like this area, this like 2 feet of the right side of my lane, because I was basically riding the left line, which was left line in the left lane there. And the only reason I was in the left lane there is because they had a car on the right that was stopped with his hazard lights on. So I had pulled into the left lane and was going to be moving back over to the right lane momentarily. And as I had my signal on and I was about to be moving back over, I saw this and I didn't want to be whipping over or something like that, trying, because I knew he was going that way. And you may say, well, if I moved into the right lane, maybe it wouldn't have been the case, but considering the deer was going that way, and I saw that as I was approaching, he was approaching like the middle of my lane. If I went that way, I would only be going into his way. So I was looking at this saying, I have a better chance of staying on the left-hand side of the left lane and not hitting him. Ended up being that he ended up going that direction and I ended up steering clear of him, which was, he was running and then he went out wider. There was a car that was in the right lane and he was actually flying up past me on the right. Because he was one of those guys he was riding in the left lane. And when I moved over to clear that vehicle that was stopped, he went ahead and decided he was going to go the right-hand lane and try to pass me. Well, as soon as he was in the right lane, he was behind me. I wasn't going to hit him even if I whipped over. But, by the time I slowed down and the deer was running my direction, he saw it and he slowed down too. So as soon as the deer completely got out of the road, I moved over to the right. He whipped back around me to the left anyway. I don't know if I explained that right, but anyway, that was the way it was. My second run that was supposed to be going to Tryon and Woodstock wasn't ready. I'm sorry. That wasn't what I was originally assigned Commerce and Hartwell. That wasn't ready. Even when I got there, they hadn't even assigned a trailer yet. So instead, I was assigned Tryon and Woodstock. That's what it was. And as I was driving to Tryon, which means driving around 285, going up 75, and then taking about 30 miles of back roads or something like that, going over to Tryon, something that I've never experienced before happened, and it caught me by surprise and really irritated me, because I think I told you that when I first started with Martin, they told us do not ever exceed 75 miles an hour under any circumstances, and I don't. I will mainly get up to, like, by the time I hit 73, I noticed that the truck is going fast. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? That would be like if it was going way down the hill fast. There are a couple places in Georgia that you'll end up going down pretty fast. And if I'm in the truck that sets cruise control for 67 miles an hour, the Jakes will kick in gear and it will slow me down to 71. But sometimes I'll see it go faster than that. But by then I hear the engine revved up and I'm like, whoa, back off a little bit. But this time I was plenty of distance behind another semi that was behind another semi and behind another semi. So there was a line of us in the right-hand lane. And it was smooth sailing. It was, quiet. It was late and whatever else. And I was just going with these trucks. And apparently, normally I will sit there and just have my foot on the accelerator, and gently, if I start to go up a hill, I will start to put the accelerator on so that way I can try to maintain my speed. That way I can maintain at least 65 going up the hills. I don't want to end up slowing it down, because if you start slowing down, you start losing that momentum, you can slow way down. And normally what I do is I take my foot off, so that way as I get going down the hill, the Jakes will engage if I'm going down the hill again, and that way they'll be there. But apparently I was pressing the accelerator ever so slightly, and so the Jakes never kicked in gear. And I was going with the trucks in front of me for a good 15, 20 miles. And so I was just going with them, and we were going probably in the higher part of the 60s and maybe around 72, 73 at the fastest. And that's at the fastest. But I wasn't gaining on them. I wasn't losing ground on them or anything like that. I was basically staying in cruise control, which is where I normally live. And I looked down and suddenly saw my speedometer maxed out at 79 miles an hour, and I put on the brakes. I tell you, it was not the truck wasn't loud. It didn't, normally if you start to exceed about, 71, 72, you feel it fast. You feel it just, the truck is like, getting going. And this was a fully loaded truck at this point going to Tryon. So, I mean, it was only 28,000 pounds, but still, that caught me by surprise. The thing was just, normally it's like this, but this time it was just smooth sailing. And when I got going down this hill and I saw, I was like, it feels a little fast. And I glanced down and saw 79. My heart leapt. I jumped to attention. I put on the brakes, not slamming them on, but I put them on fast because it went 79, 75, 71. I mean, pretty quickly. And then it continued to I slowed down all the way to 60 to 65. It actually went down below that a little bit because I was slightly going downhill. But because I never took my foot completely off the accelerator, it was barely touching, I guess. The Jakes never came on. First thing I did is I made sure the Jakes were on, and it was still stage 3. I always drive in stage 3. And the trucks in front of me start pulling away from me at that point as soon as I hit the 65. And I'm like, I was just going with the flow of traffic, and it didn't feel like it was going really fast. I'm like, oh man, I screwed that up really bad. That was the fastest I had ever been in a semi. And I tell you, it was something that startled me because that caught me by surprise. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's no big deal. 79. Well, when the company tells you they don't want you to exceed 75 and you don't exceed 73 before you're like, no, I'm going to put my brakes on if I see that thing hit 74. Because there'll be sometimes I'll be going down a hill. I'll see it go, 67, and then it slowly gets up to 68. Then it's a little bit faster to 69, then 70, then 71, 72, 73. I'm like, oh, you're starting to accelerate too fast. And if I start to see myself getting toward the bottom of the hill, I'll put my foot on the brake and just wait there to see what happens. If it hits 74 and I'm hitting the level part, I know it's going to go slower. I know it's going to slow down. And since the speed limit is 70 miles an hour in Georgia in most places anyway, I'm not that concerned with it if it hits that going downhill because I know I'm going to have that momentum going back up. So at that point, I will not put my foot on the brake. I'll put my foot on the accelerator. That way the Jakes will not kick in gear, and I will have that momentum going up, which slows down really fast. It goes from like 74, 73, 72, 71, 70, real quickly. But I tell you, I was thinking, oh, this is going to inform their system that I was exceeding this, because that's the way it was at Schneider. At Schneider, we got a message that they were checking our trucks and stuff, and there was one guy that had hit like 79 miles an hour or 77 miles an hour, and they in a voice call said that is unacceptable. You do not take a semi that high. But then they didn't want us exceeding 70. But man, I tell you. Sorry, Martin, that was not intended at all. And that was just one of those things that caught me by surprise. And I tell you, if there were any signs that I was going that fast, because I glanced down at the accelerator, the miles per hour all the time. And I was going down the hill and I looked at it and I was sitting there around 71. And so I was like, oh, okay, the Jakes must have been kicked in gear, even though I'm sure I was listening to it at the same time and just glancing down at it as you're driving, you glance down, you drive. And then all of a sudden I looked down, it was 79. I'm like, oh, don't do that. I'm going to get in trouble. Anyway, enough about that. We'll see if at some point I'm terminated for that because, excessive speed limits or whatever. That's, it was complete screw up. None of the indicators that I would have been looking for, sound, sight, whatever else, even going with the flow of traffic, if they started pulling, if I started, speeding up on them or something like that, I would say, wait a second now, what's going on? Then I'd glance down to make sure I wasn't going too fast. But I was just going with the same as them, the same distance, the same speed as them. So I was just like, oh, okay. Well, these guys had been driving with them for 20 miles. So at that point I was thinking, why would they be going almost 80? Anyway, so I got to try on. The main note there was that the frosting, they'll sometimes have frosting for like how they'll decorate cakes and stuff in their bakery. And it comes in these big, huge plastic tubs. And they'll normally stack up the tubs and make sure that they're at least, 4 on the corners of the pallet. And there'll be other ones, smaller ones or whatever inside. And then they'll wrap it around with the stretch wrap. They didn't wrap it this time. And they did wrap the pallet that was on top of it. So what ended up happening was one of those corner pallets or one of those corner bins of the frosting had collapsed, which meant the entire thing tipped sideways, which meant that the pallet on top toppled. And it was stretch wrap, but once it topples and you're driving and just the gentle bumping that happens, it ends up, knocking things around, and it ends up being that it made the entire pallet completely fall over to the side. So as the guy pulled it out, the pallet was, the bottom pallet, and then the one on top of it was stacked like this. As soon as he pulled it out, I saw it like this, and then it just started to go, and it just completely fell over. So they had to completely, probably insurance, all that, because it was pretty badly damaged. The frosting was okay, but everything on top, it felt really bad. Let's see, that was try on. Then I got to Woodstock. I arrived there at 4:35 a.m. and it was a fast unload to the dock. They did not, run things and whatever else. There's a team of guys, and this week here was a very organized week for the teams. I was very surprised. Normally, what happens is they'll pull it off there and they'll pull it straight off, and then somebody will pick up the pallet and leave with it, or they'll pick it up and they'll turn it this way so that way they can grab it. Or sometimes they'll just take it and move it to the end of a line and then somebody else. So it depends on how they're doing it. If it's a longer distance to run, the person that pulls it off of the trailer will put it a farther distance away. That way, as the pallet starts stacking up, people can, there's still room. It just kind of depends. In this case though, they unloaded me really fast to the dock. It was the Woodstock was a, Sam's Club, and there was no competition in that. It was, I got there and this was technically my Monday, but it was actually in the real world, it was a Saturday morning because I started on Friday night. So in the real world, so I got there and, they unloaded me really fast, and it was to the dock. Normally they don't do it to the dock. They take things back, but they actually had, he was pretty organized. He was pretty fast, and he had people running for him. So, he pulled things off, and then, as soon as he got me unloaded, I'm sure he ran things back. And so it's only out of the trailer for a matter of minutes before they're running it back. So there's not going to be compromised temperatures or whatever. And many of the times that we end up pulling pallets off of the trailers, they're pulled into the dock anyway. Because you can't just you could do like 1 or 2 pallets and leave them on the trailer where it's climate controlled. But if there's more than that, you have to move them out into the dock someplace while they completely offload, and then they put them back on. And part of the reason why it's set to the temperatures they are is because it's going to take a little while for it to cool, for it to raise in temperature to an unsafe level. So, they kind of compensate for that. So that way it's overly cold, which is why like frozen, when you do frozen dairy, frozen is at negative 20 degrees. Does it need to be negative 20 degrees? No, it doesn't. But they want it to be overly frozen. That way, if it's outside or something like that, moving over to their freezers, it's not going to drop in temperature if it's out for 10, 15 minutes. It's not going to drop to the point where things start melting. It's going to still be very, very cold. Anyway. So, the only thing about the Woodstock was that there was there was some juice stacks that like where they have like a cardboard thing of 6 things of juice. And there was a few of those that were all in one line there, and they weren't wrapped. They were not wrapped with the stretch wrap. So again, it's one of those things where DCs are rationing stretch wrap, and the areas that are not stretch wrapped completely are the ones that end up shifting and collapsing. So they ended up not stretch wrapping this one little section of the juices, and they were like Simply whatever juice is like one of those. It wasn't Simply, but it was another one that was like the same kind of thing. But the cardboard with the stability from the plastic from the bottles is fine. It can support the pallets that are put on top of it. As soon as you don't wrap them though, and they start shifting, that's when things start to shift like this a little bit. The cardboard and the plastic can't maintain, and then it ends up collapsing. And so they end up having a lot of juice all over the place, and it has to be insuranced out, damaged out, which is annoying. I feel really bad whenever that happens because I can't participate in the cleaning process. We're not supposed to handle freight. Occasionally, if I see something, if I see something and it's gonna start, they're pulling it out, a pallet out, and they're not paying attention, and I see something that's starting to get hit by the top of the trailer. We do roll up doors. Well, if there's a lock that's supposed to be at the top of them. Not all the trailers have those locks. So if I see that there's no lock, and so it doesn't come all the way up, and I can't lift this up in time because they're pulling out the trailer, what I'll do is I will at least, stabilize and make sure that it's not going to knock anything off. Sometimes it might clip the very, very edge of it and start to fall back. So I'll stabilize it and hold it and then put it back up. Sometimes it's just a little simple thing. I'm not going to jump in front of a pallet if it's collapsing, but you know how it is. My Tuesday was I was assigned Hartwell, Travelers Rest, and then Greenville, and then I had a second load, which was Macon. All the stops were uneventful, but taking off was a bit of a hassle because I noticed that just like a couple of weeks ago, my temperature on one of my zones was rising. It was going up and up and up, and it was zone 1. And I was trying to figure out what that was about. So I asked one of the techs after I fueled up the reefer, and he went out there and looked, and it is apparently it needed to be just run through a defrost. So he ran it through a defrost, and the temperature came right back down. It still took 20 minutes or so to do, but he said that it's just so cold or so hot out there that what ends up happening is the refrigeration units are sometimes freezing over, and they're getting too frosty, and then it just doesn't work correctly. So he got me back under control, and the temperature was dropping. I said, do I need to red tag the trailer? He said, no, not at all. It's just so cold that the refrigeration units will sometimes get overly bombarded with moisture and need to be defrosted because they're not going to function correctly. Same thing as a house air conditioning unit, but that's not nearly as beast mode as these refrigeration units are. To be able to go to negative 20 degrees, pretty awesome. Mr. Freeze from the Batman universe would love that. So that's probably what he uses. And to talk about him like he's real. Now, here's something that was interesting. My second stop was Macon. It had taken me about 8 hours to do this first run and go out and go to Hartwell, Travelers Rest, and Greenville. But when I came back for the Macon, this is where it was a little bit of a problem here, because I could maybe get down to Macon, which is like 130, 140 miles, something like that. About 130 miles. I can get down there, even though I think it's technically like 70 miles written on the paper, or 85 miles, something like that written on the paper. It's supposed to be like a round trip of like, if I've gone to Macon and back, it's supposed to be like 175 miles. But that's if you take the back road. If you go straight down 138 in Conyers and you go that way, you don't do that. You jump on 20, then you take 285 around to 675 south, then go down from there. It's going to be much faster. This ended up being an issue though, because when I was on my way back, what I'll normally do is if I have a second load is I'll go back, I'll drop my trailer, I go ahead and complete my paperwork and stuff, which I was in the truck again that did not have a working workflow again. So I ended up having to manually send in my times to the office. Anyway, I will complete out all that stuff, send in my DVIR, send in my macro for that, and then I'll go ahead and load up the trip number for the next load into my in-transit app, which is what tracks our progress. It also tells me the trailer number. And so I'll go ahead and hook that trailer, run it back over, start to fuel up the reefer, and then because it's right next to the office, I will run in real quick to drop off my paper and pick up my next paperwork while it's fueling up the reefer. And some people will grab it and squeeze it and just let it go maximum. I usually, when I fuel up, I will put it up to the very first stop, where it's coming out, maybe at like 40% speed. And then I'll click the little thing. That way it doesn't splash back and stop it. And then, until it fills up, and then I'll run inside and come back. And by then it's already stopped anyway, but that way it doesn't get frothy and doesn't bounce back. And then what I'll do is I'll turn on the light that's on my forehead, and I'll squeeze the fuel out until I see the level rise up inside the little, the neck spout thing or whatever. And once it's like 2 or 3 inches below, I'll pull out. That way it's kind of technically overfilling it, but what it is able to do is it draws through that. So many times by the time I get back to the DC at the end of my shift, I'll look down at the fuel level and it's at like full. It's still at full. It's maybe slightly below full. So I don't end up running back and refueling the reefer, because if I do, it's only going to take like a gallon. Or there's been times that I've gone back to refuel it and I'll squeeze the handle and it stops instantly because it's splashing back. So I'm like, well, why do I even bother? So if I technically, I guess you would consider overfilling it, then it's fine. It works great. So, I don't know if you're supposed to do that. I know in a car you don't really overfill it, but it draws out the bottom. So why would it be an issue? If somebody knows if it's bad for it, let me know, because I've asked a couple of people, but people are like, I've never really seen that as an issue. So I'm like, okay, well, if it's nothing that's like, oh no, don't do that, then I guess if it's bad for it, I won't do it. But it's always usually better to have a full tank than not. And I don't know if overly full is a bad thing in the world of trucks, but who knows? But anyway, so I then ran inside to get my paperwork, and she handed me the paperwork, and I noticed, I started out with it and then I went back inside because I noticed there's a backhaul slip on the top. And I said, is there a backhaul on this too? And she just looked at me and nodded. And I'm like, I can't do this then, because it was going to be like with about 6 hours left on my total clock, because I had about 5 hours left on my drive, I guess it was. Maybe a little less than that. But after finishing my entire thing, I was like, I can't do that. And she just looks at me weird. And because I'd already done it 275 miles at that point. And she said, you can't do 258? I said, no. I said, because my hours, the way they are right now, I could get to Macon. If there's no competition in the dock, which there shouldn't technically be, I should be able to get back. And probably if they take their typical hour and 15 minutes to unload, I might get back with 45 minutes left. It would be tight, but I could do it. And if I needed to, I could extend my clock using the macro 56 to extend my 14-hour clock up to 16. Because if I was delayed at all, it would be delayed at the Sam's Club. And I could also, if I was there for more than 2 hours, I could do a split and call it the 2-hour split. That also resets a 14 hour. So you can still save your 16-hour. That's what I would end up doing, because I end up researching splits, and that is a possible thing to do. It doesn't do anything for your 11-hour, but you can extend your 14-hour by doing that. Anyway, she said, you can't do 258 miles? I said, I can't do that. And I can maybe get back, but then I can't go and pick up a backhaul and bring it back. So I said, yeah, I can't do this. And she said, oh, okay. And then she ends up giving me an Athens Snellville, which is not many miles. And so I was like, do you have anything else? And she's like, well, that's what's ready. The biggest issue they were running into was what is ready. There was a few times this week where there were people that the loading process was a little slower than normal because it just wasn't, I guess they were understaffed or something. And the yard was also extremely overcrowded at this point. I mean, I was blocked getting to the fuel aisle. And so by the time they assigned me this Athens Snellville, I just refilled their reefer. So whoever picked up that trailer after me was like, oh, wow, look, this thing's full. Anyway, so I parked the trailer, had to fill out the macro 19 for that because you're supposed to fill that out for any trailer you hook. And then I picked up the trailer and then started heading back over to the fuel island. The problem that we ran into is that about, 1:32 or something like that a.m., we start getting a lot of these refrigerated trailers that come in that are the OTR drivers and stuff that are bringing us product that the DCs are loading up, like banana truck will come in. There'll be one that's full of, something else. And then there'll be another one that's full of something else. And then they take all the stuff in there and then they use it to build the pallets that go to the different Walmarts. And, but I tell you, it was barricaded because what had happened is this one extended cab trailer was trying to back in, and he got himself off. So and this is like one of the last docks that was on the way to the fuel line. So he was started to back in. He did and as he backed in, he was off alignment, so he had to pull forward. But at this point, there was a trailer on this side that was starting to U-turn around, and he'd come around this way to stop. And then the extended cab pulled forward. He got himself in alignment again and started to pull back. But because he was extended cab, he wasn't able to go way back into the dock. So this one was already, this truck and trailer was already partway jackknifed. But the thing was, as soon as he pulled out of his spot and started to make his turn, people there pulled in behind him. And because of this extended cab that was pulling back there, he was stuck at this point. So it ended up being this big cluster fornication of all the trucks that were trying to, because he was jackknifed. He was like a right angle just about trying to get by the extended cab and wasn't able to. So he would try to back up, but he wasn't able to because the trucks over here were already backed way up. There's like 5 truck trailers deep. And then there were little, the yard jockeys were zapping in between them. And then you had bobtails doing the same thing. There was no room for us because I needed to get to the other side of that jackknife tractor trailer. So he ended up finally, taking some of the jackknife out and then backing up a little bit and then jackknifing himself to the point where he could barely miss the extended cab before he got out. They were able to give him just enough room to be able to do that. And anyway, by the time I got out of there, it took a while. Fueled up and I got out of there though, but I tell you, the neighborhood market in Athens, I tell you, the lady that works there and does the unloading is nice, but she is so slow. She's a chatty person, very outgoing. She'll talk to other people, which I'm sure makes her a great employee, but it's terrible from a truck perspective because we're just waiting there forever. By the time I was ringing the doorbell, starting right at 4, they didn't let me in until almost 4:15. She wasn't ready until almost 4:30. And when she comes over there, she just slowly starts gathering. It'll take a few minutes, and then she slowly starts grabbing the paperwork, and then she starts slowly writing things down. And I'm like, anyway, she then pulls out the pallet jack and picks things up and brings it out. And then as she gets it out, she'll stop and talk to a few people. She'll leave and come back. And after directing people on what to do, I'm like, come on, just go, concentrate on me. Anyway, so you can imagine that I still got to the Athens early enough. But I tell you, it was not very exciting to me. Waiting for her. She's just so slow. Then trying to connect up the ratchet strap. It wouldn't go in the E-track. So when I was finally done there, I could not even get the ratchet strap to go into the E-track. I tried multiple different sides on the left and the right-hand side before tossing my hands up in the air and saying, it's not the ratchet. I've used the same ratchet for probably 2 months. And maybe a month. But still, it's never been an issue. Occasionally, you'll run into one that's a little tight. This entire thing, both E-tracks on both sides would not go. So I was like, I'm going to have to baby this thing. This is another one of those that had no strap on it when I opened up the lift gate, or the rolling door. So anyway, so I ended up having to drive very slowly to the Snellville location, which is no big deal. I mean, it's just straight down 316, all very, very few stops, but it was everything was wrapped correctly this time. So I was a little more at ease than I would normally be, but I wasn't able to get the strap across, not even 2 feet out. Try it, never went. So I got to Snellville, and unlike the previous time I was there where there was a backup, this was a Sunday morning. Nobody's there on a Sunday morning, apparently. And I don't want to jinx it, but it was very nice. I pulled up there. The guy was like, I said, would you like me to use the device and account for your pallets? He's like, sure. So he hands it to me, and even then he was still a bit on the slow side, because he had to pull things out. And then people kept stopping him on the floor and saying, hey, can you pull down this from the top shelf? And he would do that to help him out, because remember, they have to go all the way to the other side of the store with the coolers. But, anyway, he's being a good person and helping out his fellow colleagues. Anyway, got out of there, got back, and it was fine. Wednesday, I was assigned Dawsonville, which I've never been to before, Jasper, and Dalton, with a Heinz backhaul. Now, the only other time I'd been to Heinz was when I first started, and my schedule kept getting pushed later and later, and I didn't understand that that quite often they'll have a trailer that's ready 4 hours before the time that's listed. And so I would look at my loads, and I would end up saying, it doesn't leave until like 11 p.m., 11:30 p.m. So why, I have to start really late, or it doesn't leave until 1 a.m. at the time, because I was starting my day not at 7 p.m. like I am now. I was starting at 9. And then I would end up saying, well, I can't even leave until 1. So then I was pushing it back later, which means that I could technically go until 3 in the afternoon. So what they were doing is, the last time they sent me to this Heinz, they had sent me there, and I ended up sitting there for hours, because they were supposed to have the trailer loaded up or ready for me at midnight. But when I arrived, it wasn't ready. So anyway, I had been there in the past, wasn't able to pick up anything. I just dropped off a trailer and left. This is after I left Bobtail, and then they stopped me after I got through all the traffic and issues and got myself onto 285. As soon as I got there, can you go back and drop off your trailer? I'm like, sure. So I went back and dropped off the trailer, even though they said, no, we don't want you to do that. You can't do that. I'm like, okay. Anyway, trailer was on the dock when I got there. So I asked one of the yard jockeys, first of all, I tried to get the attention of one, and this one guy just went right past me. I was like, hey, waving my hand and stuff like that. He glanced at me and just continued on, and he backed in at the maintenance facility for the trailers and then got out. And I guess he went on a 15-minute break, because I tell you, he was just not going to have it. He wasn't going to help me or whatever. Second yard jockey that came around, I waved him down. He stopped and I said, can you pull this out like 10 feet so I can hook on it? He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. And then he left and went and picked up another trailer and then disappeared with that one. Then he came back and grabbed mine. Interesting thing though is I guess he must have been new, because he kind of futzed around with it a bit. Normally they just go back there, they hook it and pull out 10 feet and you're good to go. He said, where do you want me to put it? I said, just pull out 10 feet. He says, 10 feet? And he pulled it out like 30. And then he was like looking at me like this. I'm like, yeah. And so then he started to back it up, and then he went forward again with it. And then he turned and went to the right. So it was parallel with the trailers. And it wasn't fully parallel. It was like angled. So I'm looking at this thing, okay, I'll pull in there and I'll back in. And after he had unhooked from it, he then went back, hooked up to it again, and then turned it a little bit more of an angle. I'm like, what are you doing? Just move. I can hook this thing and be out of here. Anyway, it took me just like the previous day, when it took me like 40 minutes to get out of there, because all the jackknifing and the waiting for the load and the changing of loads and stuff. And that was after I got back. This time it took just about 30 minutes. Actually, I take that back. It was 40 minutes. I'm looking at my notes here. So it's 2 days, 40 minutes. Anyway, I got to Dawsonville, and there was a guy there that just did not care. He was just going to pull things off the trailer. He was going to hook the pallet, bring it out. And if anything hit the top of the trailer, he was just going to power straight on through it. There was no point in me jumping out trying to you know, stop anything or say, hold on a second, and grab a box that was having a problem and then hold it. And then as soon as it passes the door, he just powered right on through it. So I'm watching pallets and stuff flying off. Problem is, if you have a backhaul going to Heinz, they want the trailer to be clean. If it's not clean, you got to go and get it washed out. Well, I don't want to go to a Blue Beacon and sit there because it takes them 20 to 40 minutes to clean out a trailer. And that's if there's no wait. I don't want them going there and watching them do their whole procedure and sit there and do this. I've watched the procedure happen before in videos, and I've even seen it in like real life as I've been at neighboring truck stops. I've watched the process, and it takes a while. And so if there's no line and they can get me right in there, still it's going to take 40 minutes. So I would much rather just have a clean trailer and sweep it out at the end of the day. Because if it's clean, they don't require you to have a washout. This guy, though, he just starts powering through stuff, and I'm watching stuff fly all over the place somehow, and I have no idea how this happened. I guess it must have been flowers. There was dirt that somehow got in cardboard and got trampled over, so I see all this like wet dirt on the trailer. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I got annoyed by that, but I'm not going to sit there and yell at him about this because he's just going to do whatever he's going to do. And I was just like, you're just powering right on through this thing. He's like, yep. I'm like, all right. I mean, because I pointed out to him, I'm like, you're just powering straight on through this door. Are you seeing it? And he just did not care. Anyway, I mean, I don't like seeing damaged product. That just to me is one of those irritating things. If I was a customer, I don't normally like to see, bent up or whatever products, but most of the time I will still buy one of those as long as it's still intact, because I know somebody else is not going to want to, if it's not leaking or something like that. But this guy here just had no care. So some of those were so badly messed up, and there was dirt and there was some liquid and stuff. I'm like, man, this is just going to require, I'm like thinking I'm going to have to get this thing washed out. This is going to be so annoying. Anyway, got out of there, went to Jasper. Jasper was very fast and organized, which is awesome. Dalton, when I got to Dalton, they didn't answer any of their doors. I got there, and it was funny because the lady in the office said, when I was there picking up my trailer information, she said, she glanced up at it and made a mess up. She said, yeah, she started telling me don't get there before 8. I'm like, this location's like 150 miles away from me right now, and it's like 7 something. There's zero chance I'm going to get there by 8. So anyway, I looked down and it was like just before midnight, and I'm looking around trying to figure out where everybody is because I'm shining my headlamp through there. They always lock their doors in the front, and they weren't answering their door in the back. So I'm like ringing the doorbell and knocking on the door, and I called the office and said, hey, they're just not, could you start the process on your end? And it took almost 10 minutes, and then I start seeing people leaving. They're starting to wander, and I think they're going to open up the door for me. And they're like, we're on break. I'm like, so now I had to wait for them to finish their 15-minute break. And when I say 15 minutes, I mean 20 minutes, because they didn't start to make it back in there. But then whoever didn't have the key, when the doors open and then close, it's locked. It locks, and you can't, employees are like, yeah, sometimes it sticks, but it wasn't. He's like, oh, that's locked. So then they had to wait for an employee that realized that employees weren't coming back, walk and find them all at the door. By then I had walked around. So, I mean, it was 25 minutes once they started their break before somebody finally let me in the back. And even then it was like 5 minutes later. So I'd been there for 30 minutes after their break started. It was like 40 minutes total. And this is the first time that's ever happened at the Dalton neighborhood market. They're always very organized, even though they sometimes are a little bit slow to get to the back door. Once you get in there, it's smooth sailing. But I tell you, anyway, we unloaded, and I asked the guy if he could help me do a detailed sweep out, and he said, sure. So as soon as he started just sweeping it out, but when he saw that I was going much slower and really meticulous about pushing everything back, he started doing the same thing. He still was like 85 to 90% of the detail that I was, but it took us a few minutes to clear the entire trailer. But then by the time it was done, it was very, very, it was clear of all the stuff. The liquid was already evaporated, or, not even an issue anymore. Probably got absorbed by some of the dirt. Anyway, I got that thing. We got the thing completely clean. So I got to the Heinz, and I mean, it was the same as before. I went through security, went to the door, and it was a 21-page bill of lading, which means I have to scan with my phone, take pictures, and then scan in and send in with the Martin app, which is basically a glorified TransFlow app. And then I also have to email it. And it takes 15, 20 minutes to get in there. So by the time I called the office, and it was just coming through after like 20 minutes after I did my pre-trip on the trailer. Because I got over there, I took the picture of the temperature on the side. It was set to -10. And by then I started sending in all the pictures and scanning. Then I did my pre-trip. That way, once I was done with my pre-trip, I can call the office and hopefully they'd receive all the paperwork by then. They had all 21 pages of the bill of lading, and plus the 22nd picture, which was the temperature check. Man. Anyway, got back. When I got back to the office, even though everything checked out fine on the pre-trip, during my post-trip, right as I was pulling up there and I dropped the trailer, I was hearing a fast flashing on the left-hand side of the turning indicator. And that means that one of your lights is out or low or whatever. And the truck wasn't popping up any errors or anything like that. So when I did my post-trip, I came to find out that the front left four-way flasher was actually not flashing. So I said, okay, well, I'll need to get that thing fixed. So I went into the office and asked if they happen to have four-way flasher bulbs. They said, no, we don't have that. So just go to the truck stop when you come in later today and get it, and then we'll reimburse you for it. I said, all right, cool, thanks. Anyway, I called it for the night. My next day was my Thursday. Central South Carolina, 2 in Anderson, North South Carolina, and Martinez, Augusta. This was another one of those cases where I backed in there, and there seemed to be, like, normally the skid plate and everything meets and it's very snug when it's like this, but there was like the slightest little gap in there. You couldn't see through it with a flashlight, but it just doesn't feel right. So I ended up having to pull forward again, unhook the kingpin, and then pulling forward again, dropping the trailer, backing in there. Then it connects up smoothly. Don't trust it. I don't trust it unless there's no space. If it looks like there's a millimeter, even on one side of it, I don't trust it. Even though it still looks like the locking jaws are around the shank, in the right place. I don't trust it. Nope, don't trust it. So anyway, I got to Central. They were fast and organized. I tell you what, it's really nice when you get there, and as soon as and the gate goes up, and the first thing, and as I'm like lifting up the lift gate, and it starts to open up and go down, when they jump in there and put their temperature thing in the second pallet they're going to grab, and then they go back and they've already got the pallet jack ready because they hear me pull up and they're organized, and then they push in there, grab the other pallet off there, and by the time they push into the second pallet, they look at it, verify the temperature, pull it out, and there's a team, so they pull it out and hand it off to somebody else, and they go back in, streamline, fast. And that was the way Central was. I really like that and appreciate them for that. Right as I was leaving, and I had gotten about 5 or so miles down the road to Anderson, the truck throws a low beam error message. And I'm sure that means it's a front headlight, but it's like 26 miles. So I'm like, I'll check it when I get there. All the roads are pretty much illuminated anyway. So I was like, all right, low beam error. That could just mean that it's not getting it could be burnout. It could just be that it's just lower than a certain threshold. Anyway, I get to Anderson and I do glance at it real quick. Well, I do my goal, and I come to realize that the light, the front right headlight is indeed burned out. So I'm like, great, got to change that out. Luckily, there was a headlight in the truck already for that. Anyway, so now I have a burned out headlight and a burned out four-way flasher bulb. But looking at it, if I left at Anderson and went 6.1 miles to the second Anderson location, we could probably get unloaded without me having any delays from them going on their break. So since Anderson, the first Anderson location, there's a chatterbox there. He's pretty slow. He's a nice guy. He's a chatterbox, very outgoing and friendly, nice guy. I can't engage with him because if I do, he'll stop unloading and he'll stop and talk to me. So I normally will try to give very short but nice, friendly answers, and try not to engage him because I don't want him stopping. So I'll talk to him a little bit, but not really more than I have to. If he asks me a question, I'll answer it. I'll be friendly about it. But anyway, one of the conversations we talked about is that about throwing out product like produce if it does not temp at 41 degrees, which is interesting because when I first was in training, they said that like the ideal temperature for bananas is 57. Well, if it's 57, but the entire produce trailer temps at 41.1 and it doesn't go down to 40, policy is you're supposed to scrap everything on there, even if it's perfectly good food. That's just the standard. We talked about that. Doesn't exactly seem like the best thing to do, but I guess if you're just going to make blanket rules for everything that must follow, don't go below 41 degrees. There's probably guys out there that fudge the numbers and say, sure, it was 41 when it's like 41.3 because they look at everything and it's all stuff that's sold at room temp on the floor. So they may overlook it. Some places may. But anyway, it always makes me feel bad. One of the conversations we had is he said, I don't know why they have trail mix that's always refrigerated. I had figured that one out. It's because the yogurt in there. Even if the yogurt doesn't have active cultures in there, they always like it to be refrigerated, in the refrigerator, down to 40 degrees. So I discovered that. I figured that out. Anyway, got to the second Anderson location, and this is that location where it's inside of a strip mall, and if they don't open the gate for you at the back, you have to run all the way around the building, which is half a mile. And that was the way it was that night. I ran all the way around the building because it was half a mile, and I got around there. But once I was inside, they didn't waste any time. They got me unloaded. It was really good. And from there, since I knew that I'd left there because it was fast, their break was about to start. So I went ahead and changed out my light bulb at that point. I fixed it. Uneventful. It took I say 7 minutes because the mechanism of getting into the thing to the actual bulb wasn't a big deal, but the release for it, the way you have to slide the thing down and then you have to squeeze it in and pull it out and stuff, that took a moment for me to figure out. I'm like, I slide this down very obviously, but why isn't it releasing? I squeeze the buttons on. Why isn't it releasing? I'm squeezing and twisting and, trying not to do anything that's going to damage it, but it was very weird. Finally, I got it. It worked fine, whatever. And then I dropped Martinez without any issue, even though they were a little bit slow. And then from there, I drove back to the DC. Now, I stopped at a Pilot on exit 114 and was looking because I needed to be able to get a replacement for the Sylvania light bulb 3259 that was the 4-way flasher bulb. But they only had at the Pilot 3057A auto bulbs, they called it. It looked like it was the same. I tried looking online for compatibility, could not find anything. I went ahead and bought them saying it's $6 and some odd cents. I'll get reimbursed for it. And if it doesn't end up working and they don't take it back, then I'll use my Pilot points to buy another one that won't be reimbursed. But, the company ends up buying fuel anyway. And Pilot has their 5 points per mile, per gallon this month. So I'll get it back quickly. But anyway, it is compatible. So if you're wondering, Sylvania 3259 is compatible with the 3057A auto bulbs. The voltage is probably not an issue. It might even be the same. I didn't look at it, to be completely honest. Anyway, that was that. Then, okay, so let's see. Got back and they didn't have a second load for me that night. So next night, which I believe this is my Friday at this point. Yeah, it was my Friday. I was assigned Central, Greenville, and Travelers Rest, and then a run down to McDonough. By now it's a weekday. It's Tuesday evening when I head out, and I'm finishing by Wednesday morning. I wasn't 100% sure that these were all 24-hour stores. So I called up the office and they gave me their hot topic speech at that point, even though I was brain dead. And at that point, my mind started wandering and I had a hard time getting back to sleep. This is the second night in a row this happened. Same thing happened the previous night. And this particular hot topic was about 4 seconds recording on platform science if you're following too closely. So if you're following someone and your distance is within 4 seconds on platform science computers, which is not what I drive, it's going to start recording if you're within 4 seconds. And they're going to send it up to management or whatever to have managers maybe talk to you if you are not driving safely in their eyes. And I said, well, wait a second now. Well, first of all, I'm not on platform science, but I said, 4 seconds. I said, I know the FMCSA says 7 seconds minimum. If it's in rain, 14. If it's in snow, 21. But in Georgia, that's very hard to do because someone's going to whip in front of you if you're more than like 3. And she said, well, this is what the company's going to start doing. Okay, great. And, the problem with this is that sometimes, you're slowly going forward. Somebody will end up going really, really fast, putting on their brake because the left lane is now moving slow. And then they're going to move over and then they're starting to accelerate, but you're still catching on them a little bit. You go within 4 seconds or whatever, and you're going, but they take off, they blast off. So you'll never get anywhere close to them. And you might go from like having plenty of seconds to popping up on the screen. It'll say 3.2, 3.1, 3.0, 2.9, 3.1, 3.6, 4. And then it's because they whip over and start to accelerate, but you're slowly catching on them. One of the problems that you're going to run into on this is that there are many places in Georgia where you need that momentum to go down the hill and back up. So if you're starting to go back uphill, if you take your foot off the accelerator for a split second, you drop 20 miles an hour. So if you see somebody pulled over and they're starting to accelerate, but you're slowly catching them and they're about to blast off, you're still expected to take your foot off the accelerator, which is going to drop your speed 20 miles an hour, or could very quickly and easily. Another thing is that they love doing is they'll have a hill with a traffic light on there. So if you're trying to accelerate up and there's like 3 or 4 cars in front of you, you'll be slowly accelerating up to like 6-8 miles an hour by the time the light turns yellow and you have to stop and then whatever. So between that and between this 4 second rule, we're going to have to see how this plays out because this is it's starting to get ridiculous. I understand they're wanting to be safe as possible. I totally get that. It's the company policy. They can do whatever they want to. But I really hope there's some reason built into this too, knowing that we can try to plan for 7 seconds, but in times of rush hour, it's going to be lower than that. And if we keep slowing down and hitting the brake or letting the Jake slow us down, we're not going to be going anywhere. If every single time, if their criteria is, if they see that following distance go from like 3 to 2.7 to 2.5 or whatever, they see it going down, the system's recording. But if it goes from like, if somebody pulls in front of you and they're like 3.2 and then it goes to 3.5, whatever, then the system doesn't record or flag that to go to manager. I just really hope there's some sort of thought process put into this, because if not, drivers who are perfectly safe are going to be fired. It's a concern of mine. And that could just be because somebody rips in front of them and then takes off, but you're slowly catching them. And I'm not saying like you're going 55 miles an hour, they pull over from a stop position, don't put on your brakes because they might accelerate up fast. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is if you're going 45 miles an hour and a car pulls over and they're going 30 and then they start to take off really fast and you're going up a hill, it would be nice if the company doesn't look for that as a reason to terminate people. I'm not advocating for or endorsing unsafe driving by any means. But when you're a driver, it's a little different than when you're a policymaker. It's one of the big issues that I have with the government. The rules that regulate truck drivers and stuff like that, they seem to be like, oh yeah, let's make rules that affect truck drivers, and they don't know what it's like living that lifestyle. They don't know what it's like over the road. They don't know what it's like when you're sometimes stuck for a long extended period of time, and a company like Schneider does not allow you to do a split or change your clock in any way, or personal conveyance or anything. They don't allow you to do any of that stuff, and you'll end up screwing yourself up. That's the reason why, looking back in retrospect, I would not have been in violation. That one time I went into violation in San Francisco, if I could have turned my clock to a 16-hour. I looked at that. I was stuck in traffic so much that day that I could have, that based on that, I could have creeped through traffic, creeped up a little bit, creeped up a little bit. But the traffic delayed me for like almost 2 hours by the time I was there. If I would have just jumped out of drive into and call it traffic or something like that, or just even put it into on duty something, I could have easily gained back those drive hours and not been in violation. Anyway, one of those things where drivers will get in trouble for things that are not always in their control. Feels kind of shady, feels bad, but unfortunately it's the rules and the way the law is written by people that are not drivers, clearly. Now this 4-second message about this is coming right out on the tails of the red light message that went out, making us aware of stopping at red lights and stop signs. I was concerned about this, wondering if like those short traffic lights in South Carolina were going to get me. The company sent out a video though, and it was making us aware that it was unacceptable. And I watched the video, and there were completely clear examples of people that were just not driving too fast, not slowing down quick enough. The light's red. It's still red. 5-6 seconds later, it's still red, and they're going through it. I'm like, yikes, that's really bad. It's not like it just it changes from yellow to red right as you hit it and whatever, because it was a short light. There's also occasions where people are making right turns on red, no problem, as long as you stop, unless it is a stop sign this way and it's a yield this way. Then you can slow down and it's a yield, and as long as there's nobody there, because the stop sign does not affect you and the traffic light or whatever doesn't affect you, you have a yield sign, they have a stop sign. I've gone through those. Creeping along, as soon as I realize I have a yield and not the stop sign, I will go slow through there. Some people though, in these videos, there is no yield sign there. You're supposed to stop, and even though it loops over to the right, they don't stop. They don't stop at that line. There's a line there. Stop sign affects this side, and stop sign affects this side. They're not stopping at the line, and they're rolling right on through there. So it gave me a little bit more. It made me feel a little bit better, because I'm like, yikes, maybe this is going to be an issue. But looks to me like the companies acknowledged that, and they sent us examples of clear violations of the red light and stop sign. So at least that's good. But I tell you, this 4-second recording is going to lead to things like quicker lane changes. They just got through for their monthly assessment video. They talked to us about lane changing, making sure we signal long enough in advance, then moving over with adequate following distance and stuff. And now they're do this 4-second recording on following distance. Well, there have been times that I have not wanted to lose my momentum, and I've looked ahead and I've seen someone was going to end up whipping over into my lane. And because they were slowed down too much. So what I've done is I've changed lanes in order to avoid them slowing me down. That's going to happen a lot more, is people changing lanes to try to avoid having their time go down and having it slow them down. So companies like Martin are going to see a lot more lane changes to avoid following too closely. That's just going to be the reality of it. Luckily, most of this stuff doesn't affect me because I drive in the middle of the night. But, there could be many occasions, because I've driven during the day. And it can be really, really bad and really, really a hassle slowing things down. So it's not good. I can see a lot of good drivers getting fired over some of these policies and procedures. I'm seeing people talk about them in the forums too. We'll be interested to see how it plays out. Anyway, came in on Friday, even though I was assigned Central Greenville Travelers Rest, then McDonough they told me as soon as I came in, they said, "Oh, we're going to need to change you. We have a Swanee Lawrenceville that has to be at the first stop by 9 p.m. And it was like 7 p.m. They're like, yeah, we need this to be out of here. It's about to be late. So I was like, okay. So they gave it to me. Swanee, I used to live close to that one. So I've been in that location before as a customer many times. And then, and I got there in the back. When I pulled in there, they had a team of unloaders. And granted, it wasn't even not 8 a.m. It was barely like 8 a.m. at that point, or 8 p.m. Yes, 8 p.m. And so they still had a full team of unloaders. And so they went fast and smooth. It was great. Then I went, 15 minutes to Lawrenceville. And the guy there was probably the fastest hustler I've ever seen. As soon as the gate, as I was walking in there, he had the door open for me. So I walked right on in. He had the gate to the truck already open. So and I asked if he wanted to break the seal. He said, you can. I broke the seal. I opened up the back instantly. Push the button to start the thing going up. He runs inside, throws the thermometer inside the thing. He already has the hand truck literally in position, ready to back up. So he does this. As soon as this thing goes up, it opens up and starts coming down. He jumps over it. And so the second the thing is, not jumps, but as soon as it's like almost completely flat down to the bottom, he already has stepped over it. He's grabbed his pallet jack. He's pulling stuff off. There's a team of people ready. He pulls things off. He hands it to them. They are so on the ball, so streamlined, so much so that by the time I got out of there, remember, they wanted me to make it to my first stop by 9. I had not only finished the Swanee store because they were organized, but I had made it to this location before 9. And we had completely unloaded, and I was back in my truck about to pull out of there at 9:12. Very organized. Awesome. I got back to the DC in just over 3 hours from after the time I left, which was awesome, especially since it was the tail end of rush hour. The interesting note about this particular day was Swanee, I always double check the stickers. I always look at every single sticker for the number and make sure it matches my paperwork, even though parent-childs are not always listed. Parents usually are, the children are no longer, but I do see the total number of pallets and pallet locations. So if I see a total number of 15 pallets and I see 13 total pallet stacks, I know that there's going to be 2 children in there to make up that difference. So I will look for those stickers. Anytime it looks like there's a double pallet, I will look for double stickers. Swanee location had every single one of their pallets labeled with the sticker that matched one of my papers, and it also matched their location. So I knew they were complete. When I made it to Lawrenceville, as soon as they opened up the door, the very first pallet was 2, a parent and child, and neither one of those matched my paperwork at all. It was for the right store. But I was like, I don't know what's going on here. Then we went through and unloaded the entire store, and it was all 14 pallets were complete. It was on the paperwork. I saw the store number. I saw their pallets. Every single one of them was checked off. But there was still an overage of these 2 pallets. So I told the guy, I said, look at all the stickers here. You can see the store number. You can go down the list. The store number's on all of them. And the pallet numbers, I check them off on my paperwork. I said, every one of these is complete. My previous location was complete too. You have 2 extras that notice it is going to your store number right here. So I said, and it was even it was even the right kind of thing for that temperature zone. So I was like, so this is probably an overage from something. I don't know what it's from, but this is definitely yours. He said, okay. So I said, you might want to inform your boss or whatever, because this would be an overage. And he said, okay, no problem. That was kind of interesting. Now, when I got back to the DC, I had dropped my trailer off, and I went to, at that point, I was looking to get my second load at that point, but my trailer wasn't ready yet. I did all my paperwork. I turned things in, and I was still waiting for 45 minutes. I mean, I called when I was 11 miles out and they were at 92%. By the time I got there, I'd dropped my trailer, done everything, closed out the job and got there. It was at 94%. I'm like, geez, it's going slow. It took 45 more minutes before they finally closed the trailer. There was 2 more pallets that they needed to wrap and then load. And it took 45 more minutes before The load was ready. I took the paperwork outside, handed it to a jockey who pulled it forward 10 feet, no problem. And I got loaded, got the trailer pre-tripped. I was already pre-tripping the trailer as much as I could while it was on the dock because, might as well use my time effectively. I could go ahead and check the temperature, the temperatures. I can check the tires. I can check as much stuff as I can, except the back. You have to put the lock on there, and you also verify the back, the bumper, the lights, that kind of thing. So anyway, got out of there finally. It took like 45 minutes. I got to Seneca, which is my first stop. It was Seneca, Georgia, and then Seneca, South Carolina, and Franklin, South Carolina. Got to Seneca about midnight 50. Very organized store. Love that store. They were organized. They were on the ball. They had heard me pull up, so they were there, ready to go when I was there. So we got unloaded. I got to Franklin, and I was concerned that I was going to be arriving in their lunch hour between 2 and 3. Like some locations go to lunch, some don't. I got there at like 2:15, 2:20, fully expecting, maybe it was a little bit after that, but I was fully expecting them to say, no, we're at lunch. I got there. They had like 4 guys working. This one guy that's very organized and very detail oriented, good at finding the pallet stickers and stuff like that. He unloaded me, and he was passing off the pallets to other people. And I got out of there. It was not lunch. It was very fast and organized. I was so happy. I was driving with a smile on my face. I love going to the North Georgia mountains, and being that I wasn't going to a Sam's Club, I was going up there for my last load. I tell you, I like doing a shorter load first and then a longer run that does not include a Sam's Club. Love that, because the Walmart stores, especially in the North Georgia mountains, are not going to have as many stores, as many trailers coming in there. They're probably going to the bigger cities first, or at least that seems to be the practice I'm seeing. But anyway, so it was nice. Went and fueled up since it was my Friday, got back to the DC, and was offloaded, turned in my paperwork, even chatted with the office a little bit, and was out of there by 6 a.m. It was so nice. Things I'll end with. Pre-tripping in-yard move works great. I can turn it to the on position, not crank it up the truck, but doing that allows yard move to come on. You just have to put in a number in there. You can't just say yard move. You got to say why. I would put in the remarks pre-trip and then start my process. And that's nice. And so that works. Then you just got to stay under 20 miles an hour, which is fine in a yard with a speed limit of 15. One of the tricks that I've developed is that if there's 2 pallets in there and these are the last 2 pallets, as soon as they pull off one of them and it's not theirs, I will stand on that side of the trailer to block it. So that way they'll only be able to grab this one. Then I'll throw my straps or drop down the bulkheads or whatever. So I will always be, if they say, move out of the way, I'll say, this one's not yours. If not, I'll just stand in their way and they won't be able to pick up that pallet. They'll have to pick up the other one. So that's kind of a cool little thing that just streamlines everything. One thing that's annoying to me is that my pay period, we're starting to go, because of my slip seat and how I lose every 2 weeks, I lose a day. We're starting to get to the point where, last week, I finish on Wednesday, which means that we start from Wednesday at midnight to Tuesday night at 11:59. That is our day. That is our week, rather. So if I'm slip seat, I only work, if I work 5 days on, 2 days off, 5 days on, 3 days off, don't look at the days I'm working, look at the days I'm not working. If 3 of those days happen to coincide with days that of the week, that means I can only have 4 other days, because total of 7 days in the pay period. If 3 of those days I'm off, then that means 4 of those days I'm working. I'm only going to be compensated for 4 days in that pay period, which means my hours are going to drop. My total money is going to drop. Normally I'm a hustler. I'm able to get about $200 or $300 more than what I just got on my paycheck, which is pretty annoying to me, even though my numbers are not at the minimums, because I drive at night when you can get the miles down to hustle and you get the premiums, the night premium, the weekends, that kind of stuff. I got a half a day. I got 4.5 days. I'm about to get to the point where I'm going to be getting, actually it was 4 days. Maybe it's 4.5. I don't remember, but I got a lower paycheck because I'm starting to go over the pay cycle, going from dropping off my last load at Wednesday early morning means I'm not getting paid for that, or I'm only getting paid partially for that. And I'm going to be, as I progress in the upcoming weeks, I'm going to start to push back a little bit more, where I'm going to have 1 week where I'm going to get 5 days. Then the next time I'm going to have 4, because it's going to be pushing back out of the cycle with the slip seat thing. And that's annoying. And then give it another month or so, and I'm going to be pushing out of the weekends. My next day of work is going to technically be on a Friday night. But then the next one after that, I'm going to be going to my 3 days off. So I will be starting Saturday night. Then 2 weeks after that, Sunday night. Then 2 weeks after that, Monday night. So I'm going to be out of my weekends. And I'll be finishing Saturday morning, which is annoying. I hate to say it, but, because Martin I like working for Martin. I like this. I really like it when they send me on the longer runs, the ones that I could definitely drop off and then spend 2 or 3 hours driving back after 4 a.m. because I love being able to drop off everything by 4 a.m. and not have to compete with anybody in the dock, but that doesn't always happen. It seldom happens, as a matter of fact. But I may start looking for other work coming up next month, because I'm getting to that point. The last time I did this slip seat thing and I lost my premium time, and I started being paid for less days over the cycle, it really started to annoy me. It really started to cut into my pay. I don't mind working 5 days and being off 2. Sure, it's nice to have the extra day in there when I'm off for 3, but I can't take suffer the loss of pay, an extra $200 or $300 lacking just because they give me an extra day off. I'm doing this to make money. And I will be approaching the point where I will have been driving for a year. As of the time of this recording, I've been driving for 11 months. So as soon as I hit, and Schneider hired me close to a year ago now, but I was still in training for 2 weeks. Then I had an extra week of flatbed. Then I drove with the TE, and then they counted my official start date as, I think, the 10th of August. So technically, I don't have, a year of solo time. But I'm going to have to look at this. I'm going to have to look into and do some soul searching, because if I can get an overnight driving job, since people don't like driving overnight, if I can get a job that pays that pays me decently for driving overnight, I'm going to probably transition. If it means working me 5 days a week, especially if it's like pick up a trailer, take it someplace, drop another one, and come back. If it was like on a nightly basis, drive from here to Alabama, drop off the trailer, pick up another one, and come back. If I could find something that was like 500 miles round trip every single day, or like the guy, I was talking to a guy who he lives in Pennsylvania, and he starts his week by picking up in New Jersey. Then he drives down to Atlanta. He drops at a place, I think he said in Tucker. Then he goes to McDonough and picks up something, and then drives up to New Jersey again, drops it off, and then gets home. But he's 2 days out and then 2 days back. So he works 4 days, and his entire route is like 2,000 miles or something like that. But he does it in 4 days and has 3 days off. But it's something he's been on for over a decade. He loves it. It pays really well, and they take care of him, and he's just on the road for 4 days. But it's like, I would do that. That would be fine. I would also be assigned a truck that I would be living in, unless it was a slip seat. But, well, I don't know. That'd be nice, though. I mean, I would be lying if I said I didn't miss seeing America. I do miss that from over the road. America's a pretty place. I'd like to go and drive it in my car, take 3 weeks, drive all the way around America, drive across the South, drive up, maybe ideally maybe take a road trip driving all the way down the South, like on 10, Do that in the winter months when it's hotter, and then come back on 40. Then maybe drive out again on 70. Drive all the way out to California, then go up to Northern California, and then come all the way back, across the top of America, maybe North Dakota, South Dakota, something like that. Come across Montana, and then go up through the northern states. I might have to do some road trips. If I can get 2 weeks off and then do 2 weeks off again, 2 weeks off again, I may end up doing that at some point. Even though you may say, aren't you going to be tired of driving? Well, driving a personal car is different than a CMV. Driving a personal car, I don't mind driving someplace, staying in my car. For that matter, crap, I could find a hostel even and just have a place to stay if I wanted to. But I can sleep in my car. Just see America. Anyway, got to get there first, I guess. Last thing I'll leave you with is that coming up on my 1-year anniversary of the time I got my medical card. So Martin has started to send me messages saying, you need to get your medical card renewed. You need to get your medical card renewed. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll do that. And they're like, when are you going to do it? Because it takes like 2 weeks for you to get in the system. I'm like, okay, fine. So I scheduled the appointment. And they said, we'd like you to schedule your appointment when are you off again? Can you go to the Tucker, which terminal is going to be closest to you? I said, Tucker. And they said, go there, and then they'll schedule you transportation to and from a clinic. I'm like, can I just drive to the clinic? No, under no circumstances are you allowed to. I'm like, what if I self-drive? Oh, that's fine then. I'm like, anyway. So it's not acceptable until it is. Anyway, so I guess they weren't expecting me to be in a personal vehicle. Anyway, so that was scheduled, and it ends up being I ended up going on Juneteenth. I didn't realize that it was Juneteenth when I scheduled the appointment. So there was a lot of people that were off that day that were trying to get medical related things done. So it was a 2-hour wait. Then I got in there and they did the whatever of me, and then they gave me my paperwork. This is my first day off. So I finished my Friday, that the shift that I just got through hearing about, and then I went from there, gathered up my stuff, went and did this. Tired, but I went through the whole process. And then I was off for 2 days. And I'm doing this right before I go to bed, but I got called about earlier today. And the office is like, did you take your paperwork by the DDS? I'm like, no one told me to. And they're like, yes, you got to do that. I'm like, do that. Can you do that now? I'm like, I'm going to be going to sleep soon to try to go to bed because I work overnight. And right now I should have been in bed about an hour and 15 minutes ago. But I did this report instead. But she's like, well, you need to go to the DDS. I'm like, fine, I'll go to the DDS. There's one about, 10 minutes away from me. So I went ahead and got there. Luckily, I went in there and told them I just had to show my medical card. She gave me a paper, said they'll call you real quick. I got up there. I stood in line for all of 30 seconds and they called my number, 106A. I went up there. She scanned the thing, looked at my license, put it in the system, and that gave me the receipt, and I was out of there. I scanned the receipt, sent it into the lady. They're going to send it on to the other person, and it's supposedly done. We'll see. I guess they'll call me if there's an issue. They wanted me to take that, take it to the office, hand it to the DC people, have them send it up to the safety people. Hopefully by me scanning it with my phone, because it has a scanner built in where we'll scan it and, keystone it and stuff so it's correct. Hopefully it's all done. I don't know. Sorry, it's been like almost an hour and a half. Anyway, that's the update. I'm going to go ahead and call it because it's way past time for me to go to bed. Anyway, there you go, though. That was this week. Thanks for watching.